and welcome to Challenge Solutions. My name is Macy, and in this video I'll be giving some tips for paraprofessionals working with blind or visually impaired students. Before I start the list of tips, it is worth noting that every blind student does not have an aid in the classroom, and most blind students actually do not need one. The need for a parapro should be decided on a case-by-case basis, and each student should be assessed individually. Just because a student is blind does not mean they automatically need someone by their side 24/7. In addition, these tips do not apply to every student. Every situation is going to be different. These are just some basic guidelines that you can work with. So tip number 1 is maintain communication with the TVI at all times. I can sit here and give you a list of everything that I know based on everything that I've seen, but every student's needs are going to be different. Your student's TVI should know how you can best help your particular student. The TVI should be able to tell you what you can do to help the student and their teachers. They should be able to give you and the teachers guidelines on what you should and should not do for your student. They're also going to have access to a lot of resources that a lot of general education teachers don't have. But I know that TVIs are hard to come by, especially in Arkansas, so if you don't have a TVI, hopefully the rest of these tips will give you a good idea as to how you can most benefit your blind student. Tip number 2 is let the student be as independent as possible. If there is a way for your student to do something on their own, they should be doing it on their own. This might be walking to class. If they can find their way to the classroom without you guiding them, let them. Even if that might mean they're a little bit late, those orientation and mobility skills will benefit them in the future. If it takes your student a whole minute of fumbling to open their milk carton at lunch, let them fumble for a minute. Let them do it themselves. They are only going to get better and faster at those things if they practice, and they aren't going to learn anything if you're doing things for them. Of course, there are going to be some things that the student cannot do. That is why you're there. And in that case, you should always step in and help. But if there's any way of modifying something so that the student can do it without help, they should be doing it without help. Tip number 3 is let your student mess up. I think a lot of people try to put blind children in a protective bubble because they think it's the end of the world if they get a scraped knee. But guess what? It is not the end of the world if your blind student gets a scraped knee. Sighted students get scraped knees all the time. If your blind student wants to go play on the slide, you do not have to stand right beside them and be sure they don't fall. If they want to go attempt to play tag with the other kids, let them try. Yes, they are probably going to fall down and it might hurt and they might cry, but sighted students fall down and get hurt and cry all the time. This theory of letting your student mess up also applies to classwork. Your student is not going to grasp every concept. And yes, you may need to fill in some gaps if the teacher did not explain something and your student doesn't understand. But when it comes to quizzes and tests and assignment that your student should be doing without help, do not give your student answers. Don't give them hints. They might make some bad grades, but many sighted students make bad grades. Be sure that the student has all the material they need to be prepared for that test. Be sure that you provide them with what they need and give them the resources they need. But whether or not they study and apply that material is a decision that they should make and pay the consequences for if they don't. And again, this theory applies to so many situations. Let them get lost and find their way back to class. Let them take wrong turns. Let them run into things. Every student is going to make mistakes, and every student is going to have awkward moments, and protecting your blind student from that is only going to send them into a major shock when they get to the real world and realize that they can and will mess up. Tip number 4 is hang back when your student socializes. This is going to differ for every student because every student has different social needs, but most blind and visually impaired children are perfectly capable of having conversations and forming bonds with kids their age with no help. You may need to encourage your student to socialize, but you do not need to be by their side while they're doing it. Having an adult with them at all times is only going to discourage other children from approaching them. They are going to find a clique, or you may have to help them find a clique. You may have to show them new people and tell them where people are. But after that, it's time for you to go and let them be their own person with people their age. And when your student is in large groups, do not rush to their side when you see them needing help. Wait to see if another sighted student will help them. Give them the chance to ask another sighted student for help. That is a great opportunity for your student to start conversations and make a friend. They're going to need these skills in the future, so it's important that you encourage them and allow them to interact with people their age independently. Tip number 5 is don't talk down to your student. Yes, blindness is considered a disability, but being blind does not make a person any less capable of carrying on a normal conversation with a teacher or a child or any other person. We can keep up with a normal conversation. We do not need you to talk more slowly. We do not need you to talk louder. We do not need you to simplify everything you say. That advice might sound obvious, but these things happen to blind and visually impaired people all the time. Just talk to your student like you would any other student their age. Tip number 6 is don't walk on eggshells. I know so many sighted people who are afraid to say the word blind. Do not be afraid to say the word blind. Being blind is nothing to be ashamed of. It is nothing to hide. You should encourage your student to be open about their blindness. Ask them questions about it. Talk about it. Do not skirt around the word or the subject. Make them comfortable with it and become comfortable with it yourself. Because blindness is a part of who your student is, and it probably always will be. So everyone will be better off if you just acknowledge that. Tip number 7 is let other students ask questions. Just like you shouldn't walk on eggshells, you should not make other students do so. One of the most frustrating things that teachers have done to me time and time again is made other students apologize for asking me questions or bringing up my blindness. Personally, I joke about my blindness all the time just because it breaks the ice and shows people that they are not going to offend me. When a teacher gets on to a student for talking about my visual impairment, that just ruins all the work I've put in to make other students comfortable around me. Your student may or may not be like this. They may or may not joke or bring up their blindness in conversation, but even if they aren't, you should explain to them that questions are not meant to cause offense. Maybe have them read to their class in Braille or demonstrate how to use a cane. Maybe blindfold the other students and let them try to perform daily tasks. Then open up the floor for questions. That lets everyone know that it is okay to ask. This is by no means me telling you to allow other students to bully or pick on your blind student, but you should not allow blindness to be a taboo subject in the classroom. Tip number 8 is let the teacher teach. Your job as an aide is to help your student with material that the teacher provides. It is still the teacher's job to teach the student, just like they would teach any other student. Of course, you can help your student, and if the teacher is not prepared and your student is going to fall behind, you can and should fill in the gaps that the teacher leaves. If you have to make tactile diagrams in class because the teacher was not prepared and didn't get that material to the TVI on time, absolutely do that, because you want your student to stay with the rest of the class. But encourage the teachers to prepare for and teach their blind student. This is their job. They are required to do this by law. So while you should absolutely step in if necessary, try to encourage the teacher to get work to the TVI and to interact one-on-one with the blind student. Tip number 9 is encourage the student to advocate for his or herself. Self-advocacy is one of the most important skills that a blind person can have. You can get out of almost any situation if you know how to ask for help and tell people what you need. Students should be practicing this from a very young age. I remember one day when I was in the 3rd grade, my teacher did not get an assignment to my TVI to Braille for me. I was very frustrated because this had happened several times, and I went to my TVI in tears begging her to talk to my teacher about it because I was young and talking to teachers scared me. However, the exact response when I told my TVI what had happened was, "What do you want me to do about it?" And after saying that, she made me walk back into the classroom and explain to my teacher that I could not do that assignment because I did not have it in Braille. I was so mad at my TVI for making me do that at the time, but now I communicate with all of my teachers independently, and I'm so grateful that I can do that. Because I can advocate for myself and because I have so much assistive technology, my TVI rarely even needs to communicate with my teachers. Everything goes through me. And this should be the goal for your student. If you don't have a TVI, you are the person that has to encourage your student to practice self-advocacy. That responsibility falls on you. So make your student tell the teacher if something isn't accessible for them. Make them communicate if they don't understand something. At least make them try to explain exactly what they need help with. Even if they are in tears by the end of the process, I assure you they will benefit from it later. And tip number 10 is constantly be teaching your student more skills that will help them be independent. This may sound counterintuitive, but your goal as a paraprofessional with a blind student is to work yourself out of a job. Your goal is for your student to eventually be completely and totally independent. Let's go back to the earlier example of the milk carton. Say your student cannot open a milk carton. Don't open their milk carton for them every day at lunch. Teach them how to do it themselves. It may take 4 weeks worth of lunches of you guiding their hands and showing them how to open the milk carton, and then watching them struggle to get it open, but after those 4 weeks, you will never have to open their milk carton again. This also goes for tying shoes or walking to class or using a computer or any other skill that your student cannot currently do independently. Hopefully, you have other team members working with your student, such as a TVI, or an orientation and mobility specialist, or an occupational therapist. But if you don't, the responsibility for teaching your student these skills falls on you. But if you do take the time to teach them these things, you will be helping them so much in the future, and they will be eternally grateful for you when they are independent and living a successful life. But that is the last tip I have for you today. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you will put these tips into practice and help your student be independent and advocate for themselves and make friends and just everything we mentioned in this video. If you enjoyed this or if it helped you, please give this video a thumbs up so that the YouTube algorithm will continue to know that we exist and more people will see our content. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, you can contact us in the comment section or via the contact form at challengesolutions.org. You can check out the Challenge Solutions blog, podcast, and YouTube channel for more content like this, and thank you for watching.